You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. Be sure to smash that like button. The 11 a.m. kickoff around here is a little bit of a bummer. How's it received there when you talk about just atmosphere for an 11 a.m. game at there at Davis Wade?
Well, it's awful. I mean, it's like it really keeps the crowd somewhat subdued, and it kind of is reminiscent of the old Jefferson Pilot days, and nobody wanted that time slot because you want all day to be with your friends and family and kind of make it a big event out of it. And night games help you do that. We really thought, when State and LSU both, we thought LSU still may be ranked and State was 2-0, that we'd have an opportunity for a night game. But, of course, they decided otherwise and put us in that 11 a.m. spot. And, kind of is what it is, but nobody's excited about it.
All right. Maybe that might be to LSU's benefit if it's not a crazy, raucous type atmosphere. But, look, LSU's got a lot to overcome because of what happened a year ago. So, Steve, you saw that game in Baton Rouge, and KJ Costello sets an SEC single-game passing record. How much does this State offense look like that one from a year ago, for better or worse?
Well, I think it actually looks better, but in a different respect. I mean, I think in many ways that ball game was really kind of a byproduct of how LSU wanted to defend the Mississippi State offense. I don't think it'll be the same way this year. I think that Orgeron and those guys will play a lot more zone coverage and kind of force State to methodically work the ball down the field and then kind of mitigate the big play a little bit. But, Will Rogers has been good. We've shown some flashes, but he struggles at times with consistency, and there's at least one quarter every game where the offense really begins to struggle. And, that's really kind of been the deal. Even though State's a play away from being 3-0, you look at that deal and say, they're also a couple plays away from being 1-2. And so it's been a work in progress, but it's far from a polished product, shall we say.
Maybe a thought, Steve, on Will Rogers, the quarterback, because LSU fans obviously didn't get a chance to see him a year ago. It was Costello. So what can you tell us about him?
Well, he's a coach's kid. So football IQ-wise, he's well ahead of, his peers at that age. And he's only got 9 starts under his belt. Most of those are in the SEC because of last year's 10-game SEC schedule. But, he's a real heady guy. He's a competitor, and the guys love him. They play hard for him. You're just talking to the other players on offense, they'll tell you he's a dog. He's a competitor. And, State doesn't come back and win that game against Tech without Will Rogers showing some real moxie late. And he nearly brought him back last week under some difficult circumstances. But they believe in each other. And, he's a guy we think the best football's still ahead of him. But, it's just a matter of him kind of finding, what works and where the holes in the defense are and kind of being patient, taking what the defense gave him. And you mentioned KJ Costello earlier. I mean, he'll make an interesting answer to a trivia question because, he's going to kind of be a forgotten guy because, by the middle of the year last year, everybody was calling for Will Rogers because he was just a little more measured in his passing attempts where, KJ would just kind of throw it up for grabs. So Will doesn't take a lot of chances, and Mississippi State fans kind of wish that he would. He would maybe push the ball down the field a little bit more and make his receivers make a play for him.
Steve, what about those receivers, those weapons that Mississippi State has? Who are those guys that are going to be asked to make plays on Saturday?
Well, Mekhi Polk is actually the leading pass catcher, of the receiving group, and he's outstanding. He's a transfer from Cal and has really come in and kind of integrated and assimilated pretty well. We expect him to be a big play guy. Malik Keith is the guy that was suspended in the first game after the fallout from the fight against Tulsa. But he's State's most physical receiver. But I would say that, probably the guy that is probably the biggest game breaker is Jaden Wally. And he was the guy that kind of rewrote the Mississippi State freshman receiving records last year. And it's the deepest receiver group State's had probably in this generation. Usually you've got one or two guys, but Leach and Spurrier Jr. and Dave Nickel have made it a real priority to kind of upgrade the talent in that receiver room. So, Will has some guys he can distribute the ball to. It's just going to be a matter of, can they kind of negate some of that LSU pass rush to keep him upright and make that happen.
A couple more minutes here with Steve Robertson, genespage.com. He's on Twitter at ScoutSteveR. You'll give him a follow. So you mentioned the pass rush, which is LSU statistically is leading the nation in tackles for loss and sacks. Some of that, of course, is competition that they've played, but they've done it effectively over all 3 games they've played. So how does that match up work with the LSU defensive front seven against that Mississippi State offensive line?
Well, there have been few sacks against this offense where, the offensive line has been overwhelmed. A lot of time it's been a byproduct of Will Rogers holding the football too long, where perhaps, teams disguise their coverage just a little bit. He gets to the first and second reads, and it's just not there. And so that's been some of it. But they haven't given up a lot. I guess last week, it was 2 sacks. One of those, right tackle, Scott Lashley, kind of got blown up on a play on a bull rush. But the other one was just a product of Will holding the ball too long. But this is an offensive line. Charles Cross is a guy that people know well at left tackle, projected first-round pick. But everybody else, the other 4 positions, it's somebody playing a different spot last year. Cam Jones, who played left guard, was last year's right tackle. LaQuinton Sharp, this year's center, was a reserve interior lineman last year. Dollar Bill Johnson at right guard was a right tackle at times last year. And then Scott Lashley, transferred from Alabama, was out for the year with an injury. And so it's still kind of a patchwork group that's kind of learning some cohesion. So, they've been good. They're improved over last year, but this will be the most probably the most important test they've had to date.
Steve, this Mississippi State team has been a little Jekyll and Hyde. I think that's fair to say, right? Down big to Tech, but then there's the big rally, and then really impressive sort of throttling performance against NC State, and then obviously we saw what happened last week against Memphis. So who or what is this Mississippi State team through 3 games? What is a fair description of them?
Well, I think you've nailed it pretty close. But, it's one of the things that's interesting to me is some people suggest, well, the air raid can't work in the SEC. And then you turn around and there's wide receivers running open every play. And so really what's kind of held this offense back, I think, from running at a high level of proficiency is the maturation of a young quarterback. The plays are there to be made. So schematically, things appear to be on track. It's just a matter of if Will Rogers plays really well, Mississippi State's going to win the football game. If he plays average or below average, Mississippi State's going to lose the football game. So this offense is going to go as far as Will Rogers can take them because it is so predicated on quarterback reads. Defensively, I think State matches up really well with LSU, even on the outside with Martin Emerson and Emmanuel Forbes, a couple of guys that got All-American mentions last year. And so, I think in many ways the most exciting matchup is Keyshawn Butte. And then when he lines up in the slot against Jalen Green at the nickel, I think that'll be a very intriguing matchup to watch. And I can promise you that Butte has Mississippi State's attention. Every defensive assistant coach has mentioned him this week. And so he'll get a lot of attention from that Bulldog secondary.
Yeah, Steve, I've told my audience, I'm resigning to the fact until I see LSU prove they can stop an offense like this, I think State's going to score a lot of points and LSU's going to have to match them. I'm curious to see how this LSU offense fares against Zach Arnett's defense, where they did have a lot of success a year ago. So what is the key this week for that Mississippi State defense in trying to slow the LSU offense with, as you mentioned, a whole bunch of athletes like Keyshawn Butte?
Well, State's been really good against the run. I know LSU has kind of struggled to get the running game going. And so I know Arnett really wants to make them one-dimensional and then force Johnson to kind of work through his progressions and hopefully let the pass rush get there. Tyrus Wheat's a guy from Amite, Louisiana that has been absolutely phenomenal this year. He had a great fall camp. Playing really physical, needs to finish a few more plays. Like last week, Memphis' quarterback ran for his life the whole game, but because State couldn't finish, they would make a big rush and flush him from the pocket and couldn't get him on the ground. And that ultimately, I think, really made a difference in that second half. I think, that gave Memphis a little confidence. And so, State's going to have to get Johnson on the ground, keep them in a third and long situation. And I would expect State to run blitz a lot in the early downs to kind of put LSU behind the chains if at all possible.
Hey, Steve, last thing. Actually, 2 more things quickly. One, we neglect special teams so much. Cade York is sensational, probably the best kicker in college football. What about State? How are they in special teams if it comes down to, spread's 2.5, so if it comes down to a kick or a special teams play?
Well, Brandon Ruiz is a guy that we thought had a chance to be an all-SEC kicker, and he tweaked the back against NC State. Didn't play last week, but Scott Goodman did. He's 7 of 9 with touchbacks on his kicks, and then Nolan McCord is 2 for 2 in relief, and I think 39-yarder and a 35-yarder. And so they're pretty solid in that respect. The return game is really good for State, and that's one thing you look at, with LSU. 19 kickoffs this year, and I believe 15 of them have been touchbacks. And so Tulu Gurpin is the guy that Memphis tried to neutralize last week because NC State found out the hard way that, that's a guy that can take it back and put you in a deficit pretty early. And so I do think special teams are important in this game because there's going to be a lot of yardage gained or lost. And I know LSU has struggled at times in punt returns with that. So there's those invisible yards in the game. But, State changed punters last week, and you've got Archer Trafford, a guy that had a 57-yarder last week and 42.2 average in relief of Tucker Day. And so Matt Brock does a really good job managing that group. They've got some depth there, but, Nolan McCord hadn't had to take a kick. It's kind of a high-pressure kick. So how will he respond? That kind of remains to be seen.
What's the blueprint, Steve? If State wins the game and moves to 3-1 on the season, what's the blueprint?
Well, they can't go out there and turn football over for one. They've got to be able to manage the game and not give LSU the short field, and they got to prevent the big play on offense. I think this game will be won or lost on Mississippi State's ability to move the football against that LSU pass rush. I know the secondary has had some issues at times, but Ed Orgeron has kind of suggested they're going to do some things differently to try to confuse Will Rogers, and so I think that's where the game's going to be won or lost. I think State matches up pretty well with the LSU offense. I don't think it's going to be a barn burner of a game like we saw last year. I don't think it'll be that 44-34 type thing. I think it'll probably be a game in the 20s, and I think that's probably where Mississippi State needs it to be in order to win.
I still owe you a fleur-de-lis next time you're in town, man.
Let's make it happen. We'll see you, Matt.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.